What if I told you there was a time when being a bad musician could land you in a metal flute, and being drunk meant getting shoved into a beer barrel, then paraded around like a circus clown? These weren't jokes. These were real punishments. And wait till you see the punishment where they made criminals sit on a razor-sharp wedge with weights hanging from their legs. Drunkard's cloak, the walking barrel of shame. Imagine waking up after a heavy night of drinking, head spinning, reputation in tatters, and suddenly the local guards are dragging you to the town square. They stuff your body into a massive beer barrel, chop holes into it for your arms and legs, and send you stumbling through the streets like a living ale keg. That's the drunkard's cloak, a punishment as humiliating as it was ridiculous. Villagers would laugh, children would point, and your dignity left behind in last night's tavern. But this wasn't just about shame, it was a warning. Lose control once, and you become the town's entertainment. And if you think this is wild, just wait till you hear what happened to musicians who couldn't carry a tune. Flute of shame, for those who couldn't hit the right note. We all know bad music can be torture, but in medieval times, it was torture. The flute of shame was a cold iron punishment shaped like a real flute. When musicians played horribly or insulted the art, they were locked into this device, arms and neck trapped in place. It wasn't just tight, it was crafted to look like a literal flute, so people wouldn't just mock your music, they'd mock you. Picture someone parading through town, stuck in a metal flute like a twisted marching band prop. It wasn't just punishment, it was performance. But public humiliation didn't stop at bad music. The next one forces people to wear their shame, literally. Shame mask. Iron faces for social disgrace. Imagine being forced to wear a mask shaped like a pig, or a donkey, or even a devil, designed not to hide your identity, but to scream your crime to the world. That's the horror of the Shand mask, or shame mask. Each one was uniquely crafted, long noses for liars, animal snouts for gluttons, and grotesque horns for immoral women. But these masks weren't just heavy. They were often locked in place, making breathing, eating, and speaking nearly impossible. You became your shame. Worse, you couldn't take it off, not until the town had finished mocking you. And the mask, sometimes it had a bell, so people could hear your disgrace coming from blocks away. Still think that's medieval enough? Wait until animals stood trial and were executed. So far, we've seen humans punished in ways that boggle the mind. But what if I told you the next criminals weren't even human? Animal trials. When pigs faced the judge. It sounds like a joke, but medieval courts were dead serious. If a pig killed a child, it didn't just get slaughtered, it got a trial, with a lawyer, witnesses, and sometimes a death sentence. In one bizarre case, a sow was dressed in human clothes to stand before the court and was hanged for murder. And it wasn't just pigs. Rats were tried for stealing grain, cows for demonic possession. Yes, animals were dragged through legal proceedings just like people. Was it superstition? Was it fear? Or was it just a medieval way of proving that justice spared no species? But if that's insane, just wait till you hear about the punishment that silenced witches from the inside out. Witch's bridle, silencing spells with steel. Accused of witchcraft, in the Middle Ages that meant two things, fear and torture. One of the cruelest devices was the witch's bridle, a twisted iron muzzle that clamped tightly around the head. But inside the mouth was a hidden horror, a spike that jammed under the tongue or against the palate. If the woman tried to speak, blood. If she cried, pain. This wasn't just about physical torture. It was about forcing total silence. No chanting, no defense, no escape. And to make things worse, many were chained to walls, left for days in this agony. The only sound left was the sound of fear. But not every punishment was about iron and spikes. Some were about public shame, with a flair for the ridiculous. Public shaming parade, a walk through humiliation. Imagine this, you're sentenced not to prison, but to a parade. Only instead of cheers, there are jeers, and instead of honor, there's humiliation. Criminals were forced to walk through towns wearing ridiculous outfits. Donkey ears, straw crowns, wooden signs detailing their sins. Some were made to ride backward on donkeys. Others had bells that rang with every shameful step. It was like a medieval reality show, except you didn't win fame, you lost your dignity. The goal wasn't to punish the body, but to crush the soul. And if that wasn't absurd enough, the next punishment treated people like livestock. Forced nosebag wearing, the beggar's feed bag. You've seen horses wearing feed bags, right? Now picture that on a human face. In some towns, beggars or thieves were forced to wear leather nosebags strapped to their heads, just like farm animals. The idea? You behave like an animal, you get treated like one. It blocked their vision, it distorted their breathing, and worst of all, it made sure everyone saw them as less than human. Sometimes the bags were filled with rotting food or herbs to intensify the discomfort. And while it might seem minor, the message was brutal. You don't belong in society. But if this felt like slow humiliation, the next punishment was anything but slow. It involved dancing to death. Dancing mania punishment, when madness took over. They called it a curse. Entire villages would break into uncontrollable dancing, arms flailing, feet pounding, bodies trembling. They danced for hours, sometimes days, unable to stop. And when the madness hit, authorities didn't call doctors. They forced the dancers to keep going until they collapsed from exhaustion or died. Musicians were hired to play faster. Crowds would gather, laughing or praying in fear. Some say it was mass hysteria. Others believed it was demonic possession. Whatever it was, those cursed souls didn't get help. They got punished. Because in medieval minds, madness wasn't an illness, it was a sin. And the only cure was collapse. Just when you think you've seen the weirdest of medieval justice, it gets sharper, literally. The next punishment involves a wooden wedge, a person's body, and weights hanging from their feet. Sounds like torture? It was. And somehow it was also used for humiliation. The wooden horse, Spanish donkey. Sit, suffer, repeat. At first glance, it looks like a wooden triangle on legs, but this was no furniture. It was punishment disguised as pain and humiliation. The wooden horse, also known as the Spanish donkey, had a razor-sharp edge along the top. The victim was forced to straddle it, like riding a horse, while heavy weights were tied to their feet. As gravity pulled down, that sharp edge dug deeper and deeper into flesh. It was excruciating, and yet it was often used for petty crimes or moral offenses, not just pain, public pain. Spectators watched as dignity was stripped away, one agonizing inch at a time. And if you thought this was based on any kind of logic, the next punishment proves medieval justice had none. Trial by ordeal. Guilty if you float, innocent if you sink. Justice? Not quite. In the Middle Ages, your guilt wasn't decided by evidence, it was decided by fate. They called it trial by ordeal, and it came in many twisted forms. One of the most absurd, the water test. The accused was thrown into a river. If they floated, they were guilty. Proof the water rejected them. If they sank, they were innocent, though often too dead to celebrate. Other ordeals included walking across burning coals, carrying hot irons, or plunging a hand into boiling water. If your wounds healed clean, you were innocent. But let's be real, no one truly walked away unscathed. It was a lottery of pain, where divine judgment was just another excuse for cruelty. And speaking of cruel, ever wondered what it felt like to become a literal feathered freak? Tarring and feathering, the human chicken punishment. First, they boiled tar, Then they poured it over your skin, hot, sticky, burning. And while you screamed in pain, a mob dumped feathers all over your body. The result? A living, breathing chicken, cooked in humiliation and agony. Tarring and feathering wasn't just painful, it was a spectacle, used mostly for public offenders, political dissenters, or those who angered the mob. This punishment made the victim an object of ridicule. Every step they took was sticky, every move a reminder of their crime, and the scars permanent. It was the medieval way of saying, "We'll break you and then parade you." But behind the laughter was torture. And if you think that's harsh, the next one went straight for the mouth with iron and spikes. Scold's bridle, silence with a side of pain. She gossiped, she complained, she spoke her mind, and for that, they locked her jaw shut with iron. The scold's bridle, or Brank's bridle, was a terrifying cage placed over the head, complete with a sharp metal spike that sat on the tongue. If the woman tried to talk, the spike would dig in. This was no passive punishment. It was brutal psychological warfare, wrapped in iron and shame. Sometimes these women were paraded through the streets, bells attached to the device, so everyone knew a scold was passing by. It was a medieval patriarchy with hardware, and if you thought this was just a one-time act, the next punishment, it got soaked over and over again. Ducking stool, when water became a weapon. Here's how justice worked for so-called troublesome women. Tie them to a wooden chair, swing them out over a river, and dunk them again and again and again. The ducking stool was used on women accused of gossiping, witchcraft, or even just bad behavior. The public gathered like it was a festival. Each plunge into the freezing water brought cheers. Sometimes it was symbolic, sometimes it was fatal. And the chair? It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was designed to degrade. It's strange to think water could be used as a tool for torture. Skimmington ride, public mockery on a stick. Imagine being dragged through town, not in chains, but on a pole, while people banged pots, mocked your voice, and dressed you in your partner's clothes. That's the Skimmington ride, a punishment so absurd it was almost theatrical. It targeted men who were dominated by their wives, or women who stepped outside their expected roles. Sometimes the guilty rode a donkey backwards. Sometimes they weren't even present. The town would carry an effigy instead and still humiliate them. The sound of clanging pans, sarcastic chants, and laughter filled the air. It was a punishment based not on law, but on mockery. And if you think public shaming couldn't get more painful, wait till you hear about a punishment that made you suffer with every single step you took, even when no one touched you. Walking in a hair shirt, itching for redemption. You sinned. You shamed your community. So now, you wear a goat hair shirt so itchy, rough, and painful that every step feels like a punishment. Walking in a hair shirt wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a public display of penance. The shirt scratched your skin raw. You were forced to march through town, head down, eyes on the ground, while crowds stared at your misery. It wasn't fast, it wasn't loud, but it was long, slow, and deeply humiliating. You didn't just feel bad, you looked bad. That was the point. And as you scratched and shuffled, people whispered about your sin and thanked God it wasn't them. The Middle Ages weren't just brutal, they were bizarre. And behind every ridiculous punishment was a twisted belief, a broken system, and a society that chose shame over justice. If this shocked you, what's coming next will leave you speechless. Subscribe so you don't miss it.